We mentioned that obviously that it is TIFF. It is the Toronto International Film Festival. We had Sean Menard, who had the film, the debut the other night, couldn't get tickets for it, called The Carter Effect. There was a picture, actually, I think it was on a couple of blogs in the newspaper, of Drake and LeBron having a little cheers with each other before the movie started. Well, we're lucky again today. So Matt Embry is in today. And if those who know someone living with MS, have been diagnosed with MS, and, sometimes I think really the education part of it, and where we really don't know necessarily the identification of it, even if it's someone close. Like, for instance, Jenna Holbrook, who I worked with in Calgary, told me about that, and I was very, very much upset. Well, this is a different take on this. Matt Embry, who also was the director and writer for Theo Fleury's Playing with Fire, who obviously we know Theo very well. So he's going to come in next. His film debuts, the premiere is tonight. A fancy debut,
That's
red
fantastic,
carpet.
yes.
I've been talking about Angelina Jolie all morning, just so you know. So, Matt, I am really looking forward to that. So we're going to take a look at his work. Then we're going to talk to him about something that is very, very different, and we're really excited to have him in here. We talk to Matt Embry on rawmike.richards.com next.
Once that switch is on, it's just a countdown.
Multiple sclerosis remains a mystery. No cure exists.
You have MS and you're done, right?
We don't want that for anybody.
All of a sudden, I get a phone call that Matt had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I literally almost collapsed. I mean, I couldn't believe it.
When you're like looking right in the eye of it, that's the darkness, right?
Immediately your mind starts thinking, okay, we have to try and figure out what the heck's going on.
Where the industry wants to go is produce a drug, and that becomes their product.
It just felt, what a scam.
$6,000 a month for a drug that does nothing?
It's up to the MS Society to marshal hope.
Drug companies have a conflict of interest. If they want to sell their drugs and they need somebody to promote it, the MS Society is a good vehicle to do that through.
Eventually it's gonna kill me. Just help me, man.
My brother researched every aspect of this.
Science is it all. To me, you gotta have hard science. That's it.
The prescription that it's only downhill is not correct.
A Calgary man diagnosed with MS is speaking out tonight. He and his father are now setting out on a free speaking tour.
This is information you're not gonna get from your neurologist or the MS Society.
They're not going to let you keep saying what you're saying without trying to squash you.
I am holding a letter that was sent to me from the Multiple Sclerosis Society threatening me with a potential lawsuit. Tonight is about hope, and we're gonna get some MS hope on board, all right?
Once again, that is Living Proof, the film debuting tonight, premiering at the Toronto International Film Festival. Matt Embry joins us here at rawmike.richards.com. Thanks for coming in, Matt.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Something like this, generally we talk to a director or a producer and say, so how did you become involved? What is your connection with it? Well, there's no bigger connection than when you're diagnosed.
Right.
And you can't even say affliction. Could you say affliction? What do you say? Is disease?
Yeah.
What is the proper term?
Yeah, I mean, multiple sclerosis is a disease, right? And right now, MS societies around the world, and the conventional understanding is that there's no cause and no cure.
Because, there's a lot of unknown. I think about it. There's so many people that I know that have been in my life where they get diagnosed in their 30s. Would that be kind of accurate? Because yours was younger than that.
Yeah, it was much younger than that. But you're right. The average person is diagnosed in the better years of their life, in their 30s or early 40s.
So how old were you?
I was 19 years old and I was diagnosed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And now, can you take us into that? How that actually happened, Matt? Were you feeling something? Did you just go to a doctor for a routine check? Like, can you take us into that?
Yeah. No. I mean, it's exactly that. The symptoms came on very suddenly, where all of a sudden I had some numbness and hypersensitivity in my foot. I was kicking a basketball, and suddenly couldn't really feel the ball, and then symptoms started to progress quite quickly.
So it feels numb when you kick the ball.
Right. And I thought that I'd had a stroke. I think I came upstairs and told my parents I think I had a stroke, and then they slowly the symptoms kept going. Suddenly leg spasms came in, and then within a couple of weeks we knew we had to get to the doctor.
Yeah.
So your emotion when they did you even know what that was when they tell you at 19? Did you have any idea when they say that?
Well, I mean, I think I probably like you guys. I didn't know any of the science of anything like that, but then you have images of your head of Annette Funicello and like the Richard Pryors, right, and how devastating the disease can be. So it was a lot of fear back then, for sure.
So and we should give a little background too on exactly when we're talking to Matt. Your dad does what for a living?
He's a PhD, and he was a research scientist for the Geological Survey of Canada.
Wow. So this is a learned man who's probably, I mean, it's still a son, so there's obviously some obviously personal pain, right. But there's a lot of education behind that. So I'd have to think in your circumstance, with that kind of knowledge, that's not something that everybody has. It must have been a huge boon to you to have this.
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate. And my dad and I were also really close growing up. I mean, he was my basketball coach in high school.
Oh.
So it was that type of relationship, right? And so when he went off to the medical library and started doing his independent research, when he came home and said, look, you're doing this, I did it. Right, there wasn't a lot of questions, and I was still young. I was like, all right, I'm going to do this, right? And I just didn't. To be honest, I didn't even think about it. My dad says to do this, I'm doing it.
Yeah. So and not to fast forward to today, but putting together this project, obviously, it's obviously close to you. How do you decide that I want to present this? I want to get this out there, because it's not only is it great, but it's also it could be a very helpful tool to a lot of other people that are kind of going through the same sort of thing.
Right, and I think that once I hit that 20-year mark, right, once I was 20 years of symptom-free, I thought, okay, this is a story people are going to pay attention.
It's remarkable, is what it is.
Yeah,
right.
it's.
I mean, because I was speaking on this, back all the way back to 1997, 98. But people don't take you very seriously when you're 5, 10, even 15 years. But when you hit that 20-year mark, people will listen. And the thing is, you also don't wake up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror and go, I'm going to be an activist.
Right.
Right?
Right.
No, it's just
nobody. Well, I'm saying nobody, but
yeah. I mean, it's not something you decide to do. But when you see things that aren't right, or you see information that you want to share with other people and families to give them hope, you meet other people who are doing similar strategies that are working. You want to get the information out there.
Right.
So then the question is, how do you do it? Right. So, and that's where I've been fortunate to be a filmmaker. And to have been able to understand that films can really affect people.
So how many years is it exactly?
It's 22 years now.
So 22 years. So the prognosis for most people after 22 years would be what? Wheelchair?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, by this stage, normally, I think it's around walker, cane, right, for a high percentage of the MS population.
So for people watching here or downloading on iTunes later on today, MS, by definition, is what? Is it a deterioration? What exactly is the disease? What does it do?
Yeah, so what it does is it breaks down the myelin sheath that surrounds your nerves. And what this does slowly is you start to become debilitated. So you slowly start to lose motor control. It goes into motor paralysis. There's cognitive impairment. And then ultimately, the complications that come from that can be death.
So the fact that it's 22 years in, no one in this room or anywhere would know that you have anything. There's nothing that says to me that you are afflicted by anything. So what have you done? What is, and by the way, I'm not going to say miracle, because if someone has done the homework and the groundwork on this, then it's not a miracle. It exists.
Right. And the thing is, the key strategies that I've implemented are diet, vitamin D, high dose vitamin D, which is the sunshine vitamin, and exercise. And this is, I've got a website, mshope.com, which is free for people to look at. We go into this, and these are science-based strategies. And the thing is, with the documentary, it's funny because I could be a one-off, right? It could just be me. And this is where the documentary was important for us to tell the story, because it's not just me. And the patient population out there who are doing the same thing, who have similar stories, don't necessarily have a voice in the media. So the question is, how do we reach those people? How can they tell their stories to get the information out there? And most importantly, how do we hit that new patient population who's just been diagnosed? and say, okay, wait, there's other solutions possibly. There's other things, information you need.
How many a day? Like, what are we talking about in terms of those being, diagnosed? What are we looking at on a yearly basis?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to answer
but,
that.
But it's more than people probably would realize. This is not a rarity. This is not a rare disease.
Yeah, there's about 250,000 people in Canada with it, yeah.
Now, what about big pharmaceutical companies? They may not be enjoying this particular documentary.
Yeah, I mean, this is, we definitely challenge the pharmaceutical approach. I mean, I think that, patients have to question, and the average taxpayer needs to question. I mean, you need to question. I mean, these drugs are very expensive drugs. They have a whole series of side effects.
Like what could a person pay in terms of monies for medicines in a year, for instance, if you have MS?
I think it can range between about 30 to 15,000 all the way to 70,000.
Wow.
Right. Wow. The 70,000 range being the Mercedes-Benz of the pharmaceuticals, right? And so, and not that I want to spoil the movie, but we go ask some really tough questions to the top experts in the world in multiple sclerosis about the long-term effects of the drugs. So the questions we ask is, okay, if I took the drug, what is my level of disability going to be like compared to the person who didn't take the drug over, say, 15 to 20 years, right? And we didn't care for what we found. And I think that people are going to really pay attention, and it's important for people to see this film, just so the average person can ask some tough questions, and for MS patients to start asking the neurologist some tough questions.
How many people did you talk to? We were talking to a TIFF director last week that said, you know what, it's a never-ending thing, because it's almost like you have the puzzle,
right?
And the puzzle maybe starts off like this, and then at the end of it, you're looking at this.
Right,
you're looking at double. Like, what are we talking about for length of time putting this together? People talk to, families, because it's not all about the person. It's, excuse me, it's about everybody else behind it as well.
That's right. I mean, we shot for more than a year.
See, that's crazy. A year project.
Right. Overall shooting, and then we shot at least over 100 people we spoke to. And the thing is, you're right. It's almost like a pinball, where it's like you meet
maybe that's
someone,
a better way of saying
right?
it. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it takes you to another doctor, and that takes you to another patient, and then a family, and then you start. There's some. We knew obviously there were some key characters, especially in the medical profession, key doctors we need to speak to give us that scientific legitimacy.
Sure.
Right, but through that, that's where the surprises came in.
How long is the documentary?
It's 97 minutes.
97 minutes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sorry, Mike.
Well, it's interesting because Alan Park is, as those who watch the show know, that he came in within the first month and change on RomacRiches.com. He's known for being a stand-up comic, and he was on the Royal Canadian Air Force. It's that point where his bones, as he said, he was in the gym. They just didn't feel well. He kept going back to the doctors, and they said, take a leave, take like just over-the-counter stuff. He goes back at some point because he feels like the bones are literally coming out of his sockets. He has stage 4 cancer. He has nowhere to go. They're not going to operate. There'll be no radiation, and there'll be no chemotherapy. They gave him like 6 weeks. And he immediately goes to cannabis oil, the one that's rendered down. He has his own podcast because of the interview he did on this show. People, both pro and obviously con, because when you start talking about alternative medicines or lifestyles, whether it's holistic or, people, number one, think that you're saying that the only way to survive is your way.
Right.
But I think what you're doing, just like Alan did, he's not saying that. He's not saying don't take chemo, don't take radiation, don't take the operation. What he's saying is, and he had no options. Like, as you know, watching the show, Alan had no alternative but to find an alternative. And I think for those that will go and see your documentary, you're saying this is a path that you have chosen.
Right.
And it has worked for you.
Correct.
Maybe it doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
But at least, Matt, it's an option.
That's exactly it. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm a doctor or a research scientist, and I'm not telling people to stop their medications or the approach that they're taking. And you're exactly right. I'm standing up and saying, look, these are the strategies that I've done. I'm living proof at 22 years of what it's done for me. Yeah. And here's some other stories that maybe you should look at. And I think that, to your point, multiple sclerosis is the flashpoint for this film. It's the disease that we talk about. But really, this is a story for anyone who's diagnosed with any illness and any autoimmunity where there's no cause, there's no cure, they don't have any answers. It's that quest of, okay, I have to take the accountability for my own health, get out there, start talking to the patient population, talking to doctors and possibly doctors in other disciplines about what are my solutions and what's going to work for me.
We are now the national spokesperson for Epilepsy Canada. That happened just about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I can guarantee you when we send this out today, we will be linking those people up as well, because as you said, it's other doctors, it's other people who have other things that it's just education,
right?
So why would your approach not also work in other cases for people who have other diagnoses?
Right.
Like that's why I think these things and this film festival is so awesome. Not just because I think Angelina Jolie might be in town, and if she is, I'll be there. And it's not good. That's a documentary for another time, and it's not for everyone. I'm just saying it's different. But boy, you get the most interesting subject matter, and because I think it's going to be wildly successful. I just know it is. But in terms of getting into the festival,
right?
Like you can't have this competition like, well, whose disease is worse, or what is the criteria for getting in when you have a doc like this?
Yeah, I mean that's a really tough question to answer, because more or less you're submitting blind.
Yeah.
Right. You don't. I'm at the level. I'm from the West. I didn't necessarily have the kind of connections to be able to in that world. So we you literally submit online. So you fill out the application and
really?
you submit and you.
That's crazy.
It is.
It's an audition to get into.
Yeah. And you hope for the best. And when we got that phone call, the team was stunned.
That's awesome.
And thrilled. Suddenly you go from. Even though I'm from Calgary and it's a Canadian film, we shot all over the world. It's an international picture that way. But now we're on the international stage. And that's what TIFF offers, where, suddenly the world's going to be paying attention to your work.
It is big.
Yeah.
Now, you also have a body of work. We talked about you being in or directing. Did you write it as well, Playing with Fire?
Yeah, I was one of the writers on that as well.
So Theo, I know very well from my time in Calgary.
Right.
And, you talk about, do you want to be an activist or not? Well, I think at some point with his sobriety, he felt that he had really no other alternative but to live the life he's doing right now.
Right.
And that movie is a huge part of it. And here's what I love about that movie, because he kept saying, "Did you read? Did you read the book? Did you do this? Did you?" I'm going, "No, I didn't. No, I'm not reading. Will William Shatner come out and play in a movie or something like? I just give him a hard time." And then I see the film. Not only does it deal with a really difficult subject matter, like really hard, and then when you know someone, because I got to know him post all this stuff.
Right.
Now I got to go back and relive what he went through. That's real hard when you're friends with somebody. But what I loved about the film is that Theo talks the way Theo talks.
Right.
And then what's her name? The figure skater who I haven't stalked her, but she's been on the show a bunch of times. Pelche and Jamie Sallet.
Yep.
Because they were in that Skating with the Stars.
Right.
And then she starts talking like him, dropping F-bombs everywhere. I'm going, I am so excited right now with this film, because it naturally just comes out. Now, completely different from what this is.
Right.
How did you handle both the ability, and this is really how I found that film, to be really heavy, because it's a very tough subject matter, but also it has its own charm because it captures his influence on people. It captures who the guy really is, because he's a different cat. Yeah. And so it's not an hour of, oh my God, this is terrible. In fact, it comes across quite the different way. How did you achieve that? Because it really, in that way, is a unique film, I think.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. That was a really great project to work on with Theo, and a lot of that, a lot of those moments you're talking about, that gem, these moments where he's walking into a parkade and all of a sudden, these guys are just overwhelmed to see him, right? And these genuine moments, a lot of that was just time. Right, and it was like we were so fortunate that he opened up his world to us,
and he does not shy about it.
And that's rare, and people have to understand that for a star, a celebrity of that stature, to let us into his hotel room at 6 and 7 in the morning in New York City after traveling, after his speaking tours, that's not easy. Yeah. And like you saw the film, and I saw it personally, that was exhausting for him, to what he was working, just even the work he was doing on stage, and then the media, and then to have me sitting in there with a camera in his face, like you don't want to see that first thing in the morning, right? But he did it, and there's hours on the cutting room floor for a picture like that.
And you're asking some of the worst subject matter in terms of its questions.
Yeah.
You're asking it.
That's right.
Like, I find it hard even having that come out of my mouth, I think.
Right. Yeah.
But it is the story. You can't avoid it.
That's right.
That's why you made the film.
Yeah, and he was, he went there, right? And again, that's time. And that's trust, and that's
big time trust,
right? And
big time trust,
and making sure that we're going to try to make those scenes as accurate as possible, and to tell his story. And I've said this before. I mean, watching what he did, right? To watch him on stage, because there's Theo behind the scenes, right? And we know Theo behind the scenes, and then you see him on stage, and then you see the after effect. Like, you see him changing lives. I mean, you see the lineups and the look on people's faces, right? And that was interesting to watch because you could see it draining them, right? But then you could see the power it was having on the people who were showing up. And so for me, in the spine of our film, this new one, in a lot of ways was inspired by that journey where we went on a speaking tour, because I watched it. I thought, this works.
Yeah.
He puts himself out there. He goes and talks about the issue. It's not easy for him to say it over and over, to relive that story, but he's doing it for a greater good.
Mm-hmm.
Gave me the inspiration to say, I can do this too.
Yeah. And with tonight's documentary debuts at TIFF, I always ask people what happens after TIFF with it. Where can the person that isn't able to get into this theater this week, or however many days it is it going to be distributed anywhere, and where can we find it, Matt?
Right. I mean, that's a great question, because one of the most important things about Living Proof is we want the patient population globally to be able to see it.
Exactly.
Right. And so, yes, we're doing a world premiere. We festival in Calgary next week. I think there's a screening in Vancouver. I don't want to say too much, but right now we're negotiating an international deal.
Good.
Where people will be able to access it.
Because you want more than the 2,000 people that are going to be at the premiere,
exactly,
or whatever it works out to, right?
That's right. So we'll put that on my Facebook and all that type of thing.
I see that our good friend Jeremy Piesaker is with you. I really is he doing the negotiation? Because I gotta you're gonna have to count the money.
Well, you what I'm also finding when a guy like Jeremy Piesaker shows up, right? I mean, this is a testament to how quickly an entourage forms, right?
Oh, trust me, I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've seen it up close. Going, how come there's just 5 other guys at my house? Right. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about
it's
it.
Alarming.
They're fans. Matt, thanks so much for coming in today. Thrilled to have you. And again, looking at sort of the subject matter, which again, it's the ability to not be afraid to share.
Right.
It's got to be tough, I think, at times where, you realize what the potential and the downfall of is, because it's not going away.
Right.
You have MS, and that's with you until your last days. But you've approached it in such a different way that, as you mentioned with Theo, it becomes a tool, and it'll be really interesting to see just how far this thing goes, because I think it's going to go far.
Awesome.
I think it's going to be great. Thanks so much, Matt. I appreciate it.
You.
That is Matt Embry joining us here on the show today. And again, tonight is the premiere.
What? We just become best friends?
Yep.